Hi guys, we're about to start in a minute or two, so welcome. Please be patient. Lots of Instagrammers will come on and say, "What's happening?" Oh, nothing is happening. So bye-bye. Go on.
Flick.
This is done. And now, is there anything else I have to do? I've done Instagram Live. There's one more thing. I'll press record over here. That's one more thing to do. Computer. Good. And we have friends joining in on Zoom. We have over 44 people on Instagram. And we'll have people joining on YouTube as well. So while we're starting off, you have another minute to start. Upasana, just tell people about you and your work before you introduce Leon.
Hi, everyone. I am a leadership development facilitator, a coach, a deep transformational coach. And thank you, Leon. And I also do OD consulting. That's my corporate avatar. And I'm very passionate about reading. And one of my passion projects is to create learning spaces for children with limited access to resources. So I set up what we call libraries, but they're actually larger learning spaces and centers where underprivileged children can come in and learn to love books and do different activities that get them to fall in love with books. So that's about me.
Lovely. All right, so I think we are at 6:30 and let's get going. I'd invited Upasana to introduce Leon today. You think something, Leon?
Yeah, I was just going to say there's some feedback coming in from maybe the phone speaker.
So
that's
you think
then coming back into the microphone.
I put my speaker off completely.
Oh.
What do you think I should do? Should I put my normal speaker completely zero? Does that help?
I don't know.
Does this help? Or there's still feedback?
Better.
Better.
It's better.
Okay, are you getting it from my side?
A little bit.
So
okay,
let's just start. I think it might be better now because I put my volume to zero right now. And then once we get
Do
started,
your Upasana side too.
Yeah, let's just see. So go Upasana.
Great. Thank you, Nitya. I'm so excited to see both of you together in the same Zoom room, if not room, because I think there are many things that bind the two of you together, which was wonderful for me. You both are some of my favorite people. You both have a fantastic sense of humor, the same generosity of spirit, the groundedness in being, and the highest intention for all. So I'm very sure that something really beautiful is going to come off this interaction today. I'm going to try to introduce Leon well. I don't think anything I can say will capture all that he does and all that he is fully. But I'm going to introduce him from my perspective, how I got to know him. I first got to know Leon's work about a year ago through Amrita Singh from Back to Source Coaching. Amrita had invited me for a fireside chat that Leon was doing, where he was going to be speaking about the signals of transformation. And it's ironic that I almost didn't make it to that conversation. I had a really packed day and I told myself, okay, I'll log in for 2 minutes, I'll log in for 5 minutes, I'll see how it's going, and then I'll drop off. Not only did I stay for the entire hour and a half, I was so moved by all that Leon had to say in that conversation, because it felt like he was talking about me and my experiences. And I really wanted to know more. And that's how I went into the Deep Coaching Intensive, which is one of the programs that Leon offers through the Center for Transformational Coaching. And through this program, I think I've learned probably as much, if not more, about myself than I have about coaching. So it's been a lovely experience. And if I were to introduce Leon, I would introduce him as my teacher. He is my teacher. He's a master coach. He is a coach mentor. He's the founder of the Center for Transformational Coaching. And he's written this wonderful book called A Shift in Being, the Art and Practices of Deep Transformational Coaching. And this book actually teaches you as much about and helps us explore what we are doing as much as it talks about our being, both as coaches as well as people. So what I realized was that, like the book, Leon's work is a combination of coaching and healing, psychology and spirituality. And somehow through combining all of these masterfully, he creates magic. So I think that's where I'm going to leave everyone at, to experience some of this magic themselves in this conversation today.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Upasana. That's a very loving introduction.
Yeah,
And let me see if I can invite Leon to the Instagram.
Yeah, I think it's good. Yes, I see myself on Instagram. We're live.
Technology, coefficient of chaos of technology. Just one second.
Just waiting for you to come in. There we go. Now I see you as well.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Okay, I hope this is working for everyone. Can you hear Leon as well as me? You can just say, can I enable the chat? Have I disabled the chat? One second. Let me just check. Just 1 second, Leon. Let me just see how to enable the chat.
Upasana says yes.
I'm not sure how to enable the chat. You guys, you can use the Kiran, you can use the Q&A section for the chat.
Yeah.
All right. So Leon, very happy to have you. You're in Taiwan, I think.
Yes.
And we had a conversation earlier, which a lot of people appreciated. And today we're going to be discussing more deeply about why transformation is not what it seems. So how did you and I come on that topic to begin with?
Yeah, I love this topic because I recognize that I work in this world of transformation. I use the word for my business, Center of Transformational Coaching. And it's a word that I think a lot of others love to use too. We see it everywhere. Leadership transformation, organizational transformation. But somewhere along the line, in my work, I realized that actually, when it comes to the actual human experience of transformation, it's not something we're ever taught in school. And there can be some confusion and misconceptions about what it actually means. And one of those confusions simply is that people confuse change with transformation. And they hold that in their mind. And then there's a lot of other misconceptions that come in too, because of the teachings that they may have picked up along the way from different spiritual masters or religions or from books they've read, that tend to fill the mind with certain ideas about what this journey, let's just call it a journey of transformation, is like. And then when they find themselves on it, it's often different than they had envisioned and hoped, believed it would be. There's often a lot more struggle, challenge, hardship, pain, confusion, doubt, uncertainty, trepidation in the journey than they had ever anticipated. And it can lead many people to therefore resist their own journey of transformation. I've heard people say, I'm quitting this. I don't want to have anything more to do with this spiritual stuff. I'm done. Try to kind of walk away from it. Right? So I find that this topic is so helpful because if we can sit down and get clear or clearer on what this mysterious, magical process of disruption and radical change is all about, maybe, just maybe, and this is always my hope, we can lower our resistance and we can lean in a little more into what it's asking of us. Because for me, this journey is the journey of life. I don't see any other purpose for our
Mhm.
existence than to move through this so that we can end up in a different place than perhaps where we began. Some might say
How
we've
did
come
you,
home.
maybe we can make it a little bit more like you and I can share, how did you get interested in transformation? How did this whole thing begin for you?
I think it began with my own. So I was one of those folk that grew up in a house that had parents that were very early on their own spiritual paths. And I was never really held to, I mean, I went to church till I was 14 and there was some Christian upbringing for sure, but my parents were never really radical or really hard to the faith and often pursued their own interests. And they give me permission to pursue mine in terms of spirituality. And I had an interest early on already. And when I was 17 or 18, starting to pick up different kind of books and exploring philosophy and different psychology teachings and on and on. So it was just kind of this impulse that I had towards my own spiritual growth and development. I didn't use the word transformation at the time. I didn't even really know the word. I mean, yes, as in I'd heard people say the word, but what I meant was I didn't know it in terms of my own experience. I hadn't yet contextualized what I was going through as a transformation. That didn't come until years later. I was just living my life, pursuing the interests that were of interest to me on the external and the internal plane. Yeah. When I was 30 years old, I was actually playing a game, and this was on my 30th birthday. I was living in Phuket in Thailand, and 4 friends got together on my birthday, and one of them had got a game, and I believe it's still available on the internet. It was called the Transformation Game.
Oh, that's
And
the one from Findhorn?
I actually don't recall.
Yeah,
It
it's a
was that
purple
long
box.
ago.
I think I have it, but I have never played it. It's a very
Yeah.
long game, deep game. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a long, deep
Yeah.
game, and we spent much of the night
Yeah.
playing it. But I remember at the end of the game, each person got a word, and that word was to signify what the next 5 or 10 years of their life was to be all about. And I
Wow.
picked up the word, well, you guessed it, transformation. And
Amazing.
again, still not really understanding that. I kind of tucked that away. And it was just extraordinary looking back how life's events just kept propelling me towards that word and understanding what it meant on a human level. Yeah. So that I could begin at some point to talk about it with people like you and others. And of course, as a coach, begin to work with people who were also on this path, but not yet necessarily cognizant of what was happening inside themselves. Yeah. What about you? How about share a little bit about your attraction?
In my case, it was just feeling very dissatisfied with myself and dissatisfied with how I was showing up in the world. I didn't feel happy with myself on many levels. And I turned to reading and books, and I got some ideas there. And then I found a gap between the ideas and my life. I said, yeah, I like these ideas, I'm not able to live them. And one of the early breakthroughs for me was when I went for a meditation course, for the 10-day Vipassana meditation course. And that gave me a new perspective on, oh, maybe it's not about thinking your way. It's maybe about deeply resting and feeling your way. And that was a big shift for me. And then it went on to getting quite involved in the meditation culture or tradition, becoming a meditation teacher, going on to becoming a monk, and then to where I am now. And for me, somehow at this time, I'm actually less interested in transforming myself and others. That's what I find. But maybe that's too big a statement. Maybe I am. Maybe we'll explore it as we go along. But okay, what I'll say is that thirst, I'll say it like this: the thirst to be different from what I am is not as compelling as it used to be.
Yeah, I'm at the same place as you in that way then. It feels to me that this journey has a certain kind of an arc, but that there is another kind of way of living and engaging our continuing growth that is different than may be experienced through the arc. And so like you, I've come to the place where I don't say what I do is I have an interest in transforming others. That's not actually it at all. What I'm interested in is supporting others to recognize for themselves what's happening within themselves when they're ready. So it's not a, well, you should know this and you should do that kind of approach, but much more, are you cognizant of what this is that's alive in you? Would you like to reveal a little bit more, illuminate a little more of what this is? And we're just going to label it the journey of awakening and transformation, just for fun.
Yeah.
Labels being labels. We'll just label. And then beginning to help them recognize the dynamics of it, the patterns of it, the polarities of it, the paradoxes of it. And when they can then sit a little bit more in this awe. And so this is my joy. My joy is watching people's eyes and minds kind of open as they breathe and go, this is okay, what I am experiencing. It's like, yeah, it's more than okay. It's extraordinary. Would you like to see a little more of your extraordinariness?
Let me ask you, suppose we're having a conversation with someone. So usually it tends to be a pretty surface level or transactional conversation. What have you learned without putting on a hat of a coach or something? What have you learned about making that a deeper conversation, making that even possibly a transformational conversation?
Yeah, good question. Because we have many interactions in our days, don't we, in which it begins out in a transactional space. So being a coach, I have a natural curiosity for other human beings. I just want to understand them. And I find that when you attempt to understand another, they pick up on that. In other words, people do enjoy the act of being heard, held, and maybe even inquired into, if you will. So two things that are in that I love is, one, I find that it helps to get quiet with the person. I don't mean quiet as in, I should rephrase it. It helps to go intimate, one-to-one. So for example, if I'm at a party and there's all these people around, there's lots of noise and people are moving and things are jostling, drinks are being had. But I've had the most amazing conversations just in the corner with someone.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe a third will join, but often it just begins with the two, where something opens up in the dialogue. The room fades away. And I, again, curious to know about the other human being, much more than I am interested in talking about myself. Like, I'll be honest, doing something like this where I talk about myself, I even try to minimize that. Let's talk about the ideas, but I don't generally talk about myself too much because I'm so much more interested in what the other is all about. And that leads invariably to something opening up. How deep it goes, who knows? But something begins to open in that connection. And that just carries over to the next time you meet.
I can really relate to that because for a long time, I would not appreciate these kind of gatherings, these parties, and this. I just felt so noisy and distracted. And then I said, why am I trying to take in the whole moment? Why can't I just find my corner? Why can't I find one person I connect with and and that completely changed my point of view. Earlier, I was feeling that, I just doesn't vibe. This is not me. I don't want to be here. And that was a lot of resistance. And since then I said, okay, if I'm here, then there must be a reason I'm here. And there may be someone I can get to know, or they can get to know me. And that's I really relate to what you're saying around that.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it right there. And you might have to go through many people in the party to find that person that's ready for that conversation. And that's okay too, right? Because not everyone is. Not everyone picks up that vibe. Not everybody necessarily wants to go to an intimate place within a group setting. And this can be an office place at the same time, right? There's going to be those people in the office that feel like, no, they just want to kind of bump into me and move on, connect about what we're doing and move on. And that's fine. That's going to be that level of interaction. But then there are those people that you sense, they're ready for something more in the conversation. Perhaps they were sensing me too, the desire to be more in the conversation with them and allowing that to happen. And what I find interesting, just to share this on go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead. You're going to say something.
No, I was just briefly saying that one thing that helped me was to reduce my attachment to transformational conversations. Because there was a point I get very restless if it wasn't a deeper conversation, like, okay, come on, guys. So, and this is wasting my time. So I realized that it's all right if it's people want to keep it surface level, then that's what's meant to happen right now. I don't have to have this attachment to having a deep conversation every time. And that really helped me relax quite a bit, to the point where it happens, whatever happens. And usually something good comes out of it. That's what I wanted to add to what you said.
And if I could just bring this back kind of to our topic, then that point you just raised is actually a signal of the transformational journey. When you said, there was a time when I was restless for those conversations. So on the transformational path, one of the signals that people emit is this sense that the people and the friends and the communities that I used to be a part of for many years, perhaps a lifetime, I no longer resonate with them. They're too shallow. I'm looking for deeper. And what happens is they're thirsting for the deeper conversation. But this can be a challenging place for people, because on one level, it feels like I'm pulling myself away, perhaps even disrespecting the people that have shown affection to me for a long time, because I'm saying, you're no longer on this journey that I'm on. I'm going off in a new direction. And there's some fear about what that means to those people that have been close to them for so long. But there is that thirst, often for conversation or community, that parallels this letting go, if you will, of the old communities. And then this permission that kind of has to be given. And this is a big piece I've noticed, is to give yourself permission to detach, to let go, to possibly offend, to possibly hurt, to possibly slight or disappoint. Because we cannot expect that you can extract yourself, if this is what you need to do, from all these relationships without there being perhaps some who are in some way not well with it. I've even had people say to me, I'm really afraid of what this is going to do to my marriage, because I feel that I'm moving in a different direction than my spouse. And I'm afraid, because we have this, we have that, we've created this. Well, what will happen to me? I'm yearning for this kind of connection. I'm yearning for it. So this is such a powerful signal for those who are on the path, but yet one, as I mentioned, confusion or trepidation about what it means. What will happen if I follow this yearning for isolation or solitude or quiet time or just not being with? Will they reject me outright? Will I be okay? Will I have friends? All those questions, they come up.
One of the reasons I was looking forward to speaking with you is because I find that you're someone who's I think you found some kind of a middle path between the classical spiritual journey, and then you have the journey of working with individuals and organizations and helping them transform within that context. So there's one of the inner transformational journey of the spiritual journey, you call it sometimes. And then there's a journey of helping people be the best version of themselves, perhaps. And I find that, at least what I've sensed in the little bit I've read and spoken with you before, is that you seem to have found some really beautiful middle path over here. And I'd like to ask you about both the people here who are therapists, coaches, those kinds of professionals, as well as those who see themselves on some kind of a spiritual path. What new paradigm, or just your paradigm of transformation, would you like to offer them?
Okay, so I'm just going to ingest that question for a minute.
Yeah, take a moment.
To see what comes up in that, the question of a new paradigm. I had not seen myself on a middle path, so I'm also sitting with that image of the middle path.
That may be my projection onto you, but
it's just a path. So what's emerging for me in the last so many years really relates to what I call the great transformational question. And that is the question, who am I being? Who am I being? A variation of it could be, who do I choose to be in this moment, in this life, in this situation? Who am I being? The old paradigm, if I could use that word, is a what do I need to do different paradigm. And also, how can I think differently paradigm? If I can change my perceptions or think a little bit differently, then perhaps I can do differently. And so much of the world operates in the think and do differently paradigm. And again, this is not a paradigm that's going away. It's a paradigm, which means it has its own built-in reality that we experience when we live in that paradigm. And what happens when the paradigm shifts to that question, that core question, who am I being in this life, in this moment? And that becomes central to our moment by moment activity and experience. The whole world seems to reconfigure itself. We begin to perceive the world very differently. We're perceiving it through the lens of states of being rather than states of doing and thinking. So if I was to say, who am I being now, just in this moment, and I take a breath and I sit with it and I notice, okay, I'm being energetic. I'm being alive. I'm being hopefully peaceful. That's just the noticing now. Who do I choose to be? These things are qualities that I would love to embody. So I begin to embody peace, aliveness, energy. And I now make this my focal point of my moment right here as an embodied way of being. And I know you know this because this is the core of our collective work, is that when we begin to rest in these ways of being that we choose for ourselves, so that we embody it, meaning every cell of our being is oriented towards that light. There is no aspect of who we are that is not that in this moment. And when we begin to look upon the world through these eyes that are resting very consciously in this way of being, I notice we begin to see the world very differently.
Listening to you, I'm getting the sense that there is being and then there's states of being. And as I was listening to you, I found myself kind of oscillating between just receiving what you were saying and then stepping into, like, is it okay? What's it like to be peaceful? What's it like to be energetic? And so I could see myself kind of, in a way, stepping back and then stepping in, stepping back and then stepping in. That's what my experience listening to you.
Yeah. So it's a good exercise even for all those listening right now, just to take that moment of breath and just, okay, put aside the words or the terms and just notice, right in this moment, who are you, in a sense, consciously choosing to be, that state, if you will, that inner state?
We have two questions. One's from Kiran.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. You want to finish what you're saying? Yeah.
Well, I was just going to invite everyone listening just to take a moment to do that, because
let's do that.
Intellectual concepts that we're talking about really tickle the mind, and it makes it very easy for us to continue intellectual conversation and defining words. But the invitation to just sit with a moment of beingness is the invitation just to really feel into that inner realm, so that it is an embodied state. And to kind of come alive in that now. And as we do that, we may notice that our way of thinking begins to gently shift. Our perceptions of the world around us begin to gently shift. We may notice our emotions gently begin to shift. Things begin to align to that inner state that we're really choosing.
Yeah.
Now, what then happens is when we go into our day from this state, we carry that into our conversations, our families, our dinners, or whatever we're doing. Noticing how long do we stay there before it's gone? Did it last a minute? Did it last an hour? Did it last a day, a week, a month? How long before that state that you have so consciously been aware of is gone? And you're back into some normality that you are unconsciously choosing. Okay. So that's the beauty of this work for me, is how do we begin to sustain these ways? So you asked about that new paradigm, what that new paradigm is. For me, that's pointing to this new paradigm, one that is centered on our choices consciously of being before doing, and noticing then that our doing and our thinking flow from that conscious choice. Okay. With that, I know you have some questions.
First of all, listening to you, I noticed that to do that was spacious. It was restful. And I could sense a subtle flow as I just stepped away from thinking to just being, and to recognize that that's always available.
Yeah.
We have a question from Kiran, and I think you know Kiran from before. And Kiran, would you like to ask your question?
Yes. So I'm really enjoying listening to two people who I have had a very deep connection with, both of you. And I'll just jump to the question without much ado, or rather, something which I'm experiencing, exploring. Being and states of being are, in a sense, beautiful states of flow, whether it's peace, aliveness, joy, love, what have you. And what I have noticed, in my working with hundreds of people, coaching people, is that often this state of being becomes like an ideal, which then people beat themselves up for not being able to be in, so to speak. I know a friend who has conducts a program, and hundreds of people have participated in that, and all that he teaches about staying in being. And in a conversation with him, I asked him, how often are you able to stay with being? And he says, to be honest, 10%. And then the beating oneself up. What do you have to say about this? Both of you.
Yeah, great. For those people on Instagram who may not have heard that, the question was, what about people who, when they attempt to be in a certain state of being and then are not necessarily able to sustain that as they desire, begin to beat themselves up or self-criticize themselves for that lack of ability to sustain? So Nitya, you want to speak first? Please do.
I think there's truth to what Kiran is saying. And I've, for example, for a long time, beaten myself up for not being enough. Why can't I just be more? And it really helped me recently. Kiran might have told you, we attended a workshop together. And somehow in the process of storytelling and discussion, something in me it relaxed, that sense of that, just like we talked about earlier, the compulsion to have a deep conversation, somewhere that relaxed. And I was okay with the shallow conversation, with the deep conversation. So even the sense of being, for me, it was helpful to even relax that I be as much as I be. And it's always available. It's always there. And I don't have to make it an ideal that, unless I'm mindful, conscious, present, embodied, only then the best version of myself is coming out. Some version of myself is coming out. And just a part of me just really relaxed in that. There was a lot of rest in that. And also there's a teacher I have been studying for many years, Nisargadatta Maharaj. And he talks about how consciousness, which some would say is beingness, is the primary illusion. For him, the reality is actually prior to consciousness, beyond consciousness. And so not even to get that hung up on beingness. He said this beingness has been imposed on me. Somehow I was born, or there was some kind of birth, and beingness has been imposed on me. I did not ask for beingness. So I find that a very helpful, different way of looking at it than some of us have been taught before.
Yeah, my response to it will be a little different, because I so work with people who have and who do and say exactly what Kiran is explaining there, that there is, for many, and this again comes to signals of transformation. How do we know when we're on the path? This is one of these signals that there's a yearning. There's a yearning to be perhaps the embodiment of my grandest vision, my highest ideal for myself. And of course, I think people that at least that I work with recognize that they're not shooting for a grand ideal immediately. But that doesn't mean that when they have those periods, when they are living in that state that they so much desire to, and they've had a flow of life through that experience, when they crash, I'll just call it that for lack of a better word, it can be very painful. I used to call it with my clients riding on your horse. Like you get on your horse and you're riding along and you've got this thing. You've got this powerful animal underneath you and you've got this. And you're flying along. And if anybody who's ridden a horse knows, I mean, that is quite the feeling to be flying on a horse. And you also know that once you go flying off that horse and you hit the ground, that is its own quite the feeling. Right? I mean, people tend to lie there face down in the mud for a little bit before they slowly brush themselves off and stretch. And as a coach, like working with people who have that experience, you know, there's some work that needs to happen there. We can't just bypass that and say, oh, well, you know, just get back on your horse again. You can do it, and just kind of cheer them on. Yeah. There can be some real painful internal criticism happening. There can be some real need for a kind of grief work to happen, some even healing work to happen around their own inner conversation about why they fell off their horse. And then supporting them to return to can be also, you know, a fairly involved conversational piece. So I just want everybody again to know that these moments are normal and natural in transformational journeys. We don't want to bypass them and say, well, you know, I shouldn't feel this way because I know better. You know, I was taught that I am not this, that I think I am, and I am that, which I don't quite know myself to be. But anyway, people do need time to process what can be a very hard landing. And they need time to be heard in that space. This is my experience, not to bypass it, not just to skip by it, but as a coach to say, you know, let's go into this. Let's go into the pain that you're feeling, the hurt, the grief, the disappointment. What's there? And as they process that, they begin to return to the lightness of being that they desire, and eventually back onto their horse, and they continue to ride again.
Thanks.
There is a fundamental question that Ria, my friend Ria, is asking. What is transformation? And she's someone who does fantastic work. So it's amazing that she's asking that. What is transformation? I seem to suddenly be in a place where I don't know what it means.
Excellent. Would you like to answer that first?
Let me see what's coming.
Yeah, please.
I mean, paradoxically, the answer that's coming is transformation for me is a place where you're no longer seeking transformation. That's when the true transformation will happen. As long as one is wanting to be even 1 inch away from where one is, I'd rather be that, I'd rather be that, I'd rather be that. If only I was there, if only I was there, mentally, emotionally, physically, anything, then at some level, one is disconnected from the intelligence of life. So for me, the paradox is, like, for example, when people ask me about purpose, I say purpose, you're living your purpose when you're not thinking about purpose. So in a similar way, in a way that when I'm truly transformed, I don't really think about transformation anymore. Yeah, on reflection, now there's something that's easier now than before. But I'm not thinking, like I said earlier, I'm not looking for the next transformational conversation. I'm not looking for the next deep hit, the deep meditative experience. And because I'm not looking for it, somehow all my experiences are so complete and beautiful and full. So that would be my quick take on what is transformation.
I love that we have these very different perspectives on the question. Right? So I'm going to take a little more of a psychological approach to it. Yeah. And the way I define transformation is like a metamorphosis. It is a radical restructuring of our sense of self and purpose and place in this world. A radical restructuring of our sense of self and our purpose and place in this world. So we can talk about the journey of transformation being like the metamorphosis of a caterpillar to a butterfly. It's this, there's a death and renewal process that happens inside the cocoon. The caterpillar effectively dies, and in that primordial goo, the cells of a new life form begin to emerge and connect and form into the butterfly. I was telling Nitya when we talked before that when I was young, I had this image that the caterpillar morphed into a butterfly, like it just morphed. I didn't realize there was a full death process that had to happen. The death process, the dying of the self, is the fertile primordial goo in which these new cells of life are birthed. So in human terms, what is it then to die to the self? There are writers like Eckhart Tolle who have said the secret to life is to die before you die and know there is no death. And what he's talking about, of course, is the kind of a death of our egoic-based sense of self, the conditioned self, the self that we have come to believe we are. But it has been often conditioned, taught to us by our culture, our societies, our families. We build up this artifice that is our belief in who we are. So transformation then becomes this radical restructuring as we become closer and closer to an essential understanding of ourselves beyond the veil of all these ego illusional pieces. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a passcode time.
Yeah.
So let me just fix that for a minute there, and I should be able to come back. Okay. So beyond all of the falsities and distortions and the illusions that we've held in our mind about who we are, there is this kind of death of this illusory self process that goes on. This is the painful, awkward, challenging part of the human process. And through that, at the same time, there is this sense of there is more to myself than I have ever perhaps known. I don't know what that means yet. I don't know how to get there, but there is this light that goes on that says, but I'm ready to find out. Yeah. So for me, transformation is this radical restructuring of our sense of self and our purpose and place in this world at a fundamental level of mind and being. It's not just change. Yeah.
And what I somehow listening to you, what stayed with me most powerfully was the question that, what is it like for me to die, or even to hold more lightly my identity or my sense of self? What is it like for me to die to my sense of self? And that question, it kind of points me in the direction similar to what that in-between state of the caterpillar and the butterfly, that what is it like for me to even mentally to imagine that or to feel that? What is it like for me to die to who I think I am? And that for some people can be scary or disorienting. And if you've done this enough, it's actually quite enjoyable to say, all right, wonderful, no coordinates, no compulsions, no roles, not having to live up to anything. And I remember Byron Katie, and something that she said, that every time you do the work, which is the process she teaches of the 4 questions and questioning your thoughts, every time you do the work, you're left with less of a story. So I find every time I touch this place that you're talking about, this place of dying to some extent to who I think I am, what I think it's all about, I'm left with less of a story. And now there's just this energy of life, which is expressing itself without, more and more spontaneously, less and less inhibited, less and less looking for validation, less and less comparison. And so it's relatively free. It's quite freeing. It's quite enjoyable.
And that's where, and this is, we talked earlier about sort of this arc of the transformational journey. You're so beautifully describing kind of that landing space. Because when people first encounter what you just said, we talk about the death and rebirth. When people first encounter that, it literally feels like their inner world is falling apart.
Yeah.
Again, right? That just engenders fear. Oh my goodness, all that I once kind of believed, I am now questioning what's happening to me. So they don't quite, there's a lot of story. There's the stories around everything. So this is the beauty of, again, the coaching relationship in the space, as we give space for these stories. But then where we land after this sort of arc when that butterfly has emerged, is this the end of our life? No. Is this the end of our growth? No. But it feels like, as I said, that kind of a landing point where then something altogether has been reconfigured and it solidifies, perhaps something has become so deeply integrated that we are simply now that. And as you said, that's where the stories seem to just, yeah.
I want to now, Leon, transition to some of the questions that people have been asking. And I'm going to try to do my best to, because we have 3 platforms here. We have Zoom, we have YouTube, and we have Instagram. So I'm sure I'm going to miss a lot of questions. But let me just see what I'm able to pick up. And also, guys, you're welcome to, on Zoom, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you if you want to ask, instead of typing it out. So let me see what we have here, the questions. What are some signs that tell both of you that you are in beingness? Anything specific comes up? You want to go, Leon?
That I'm in beingness? Well, I'm in a sense, I'm all, oops. Microphone on.
Yeah.
I was just going to say we're always in beingness. There's never a moment that we're not. What was the quote earlier that you said, Nitya, where you said, beingness was imposed upon me. I never chose beingness. We're always in beingness. It's a question of our level of conscious awareness of that state and what we're beginning to make more conscious as we go, for me, right? So it's interesting. There's that quadrant. We've probably all seen it where you have conscious competence, unconscious competence, conscious incompetence, right? Unconscious incompetence.
And unconscious competence. And unconscious
yes.
competence.
It's a bit like that, right? Most people on this planet are moving through kind of an unconscious state of awareness. But as we go through this journey of transformation, we're being asked, whether it's through a relationship or through a book or a teacher, to begin to contemplate our inner reality and our inner choices in being. So we move into a place that can sometimes feel like conscious incompetence, right? This is where we fall off our horse a lot because it doesn't always feel like I've got a grip on it. And then eventually over time, we become consciously competent. It's like, I'm aware. And there's this kind of confidence in this knowingness. And maybe that's not the right word, confidence, because for some it can evoke a sense of ego, but just this real sense of, I'm alive in this. This is an embodied state, but I'm conscious of it. I'm still giving it thought. I'm still turning perhaps attention towards it until we evolve to that place where it becomes unconscious competence, where we're no longer necessarily even sitting in contemplation of that chosen state of being. So I think each of those quadrants has its own kind of signals of when, where you are in it.
One feature of being for me is not being so hypnotized by my thoughts and stories. That they're there, but that's not the only way of looking at things. That's just a way of looking at things. So it's like the light that's shining through, in the cinema hall, you have the projection. So it's the light that's shining through. The light that's shining through is the being. And then the film, whatever film is playing, that's the story that we are telling. That's one way that I find. And one more thing I want to say here is, I find intention to be really powerful. So if I have the intention that just my presence, my very presence has the ability to, if I just start believing that my presence has the ability to highlight being, to illuminate being, and whether I do something or not, whether I intervene in some way or not, just my presence has the ability to illuminate being and get people to recognize that beingness beyond the stories that they tell. I find that's a really fun intention to have to go through life. And if you have to have an intention, I think that's a pretty nice one, that we're not necessarily having to try to change people, fix people. Your very presence, and the presence need not even be limited to your physical where you are physically. It's just there. So I love experimenting with these kinds of intentions. Mother has a question, and Leon, let me get you to answer most of them now, because I think people are here mostly for you. So I'll step back. And what is the transformation arc you were referring to in brief? Mother asks.
Oh, I'm just referring to transformation as a process it has a kind of arc of experience. Let's put it that way. For many people, it has a definitive onset, a point where they could almost point to and say, this is the day it really began for me. And I've also, through my own experience, I even got a beautiful story to share around that, but a kind of a place where it feels like that real depth of work has just kind of come to a culmination and we land somewhere. And it signals that next, whatever, I don't even have a word for it, phase of our experience. So that's what I mean by the arc. It's as though this says this thing called transformation, just like with the caterpillar to butterfly, kind of an arc of experience. And that's what I mean. A lot of folks aren't aware of this, and they're not aware of its dynamics and its patterns and its signals. And we've talked about many of them tonight already. Yeah.
Great. We have a question from an anonymous attendee. I have two questions. The first is, when you asked us to take a deep breath and basically feel the energy within myself, I could only feel restlessness. And this is how I have felt for a few months now. It's not been easy feeling this way. So then I want to be peaceful, calm, and loving. How do I move to this state?
Yeah, perfect. So first, it's total acceptance of your restlessness, isn't it? Because when we come back to that self-criticism piece, that can be one of the biggest barriers to movement into peace. It's when someone says, well, I feel restless. I hate feeling restless. So restlessness is one kind of inner resistance to something. And then I hate that is another level that we just kind of pile on top. So one of the first steps, of course, is to become accepting of the restlessness. That's it right there. And then noticing what happens when, instead of resisting, or perhaps even saying, I don't like this, or I hate this. I'm not saying you do this, but if anyone is kind of having that inner dialogue of, this is terrible, shouldn't feel this way, just to notice that that is itself another layer. That is the first step towards just, okay, I am restless. That is it. Can I sit with restless? But to come into that point where we then say, I want to be peace, that is not something I can just say, do step 1, step 2, step 3. There's no 3-step process to peace. It would require a conversation with you where I begin to understand all that keeps you in restlessness and all that prevents you from being peace. So we would really have to open up that inner world of yours and to begin to shine a light on things, some things that perhaps have been in a dark, dusty cupboard for a very, very long time, that have an effect on your current state of mind, but are so far deep in that dark cupboard that you're not even necessarily aware that they're there. But with some support and with some light being shone on these things, you begin to reveal some of the underlying cause of the way that you are and experience your life. And that journey is what precedes being peace. But the mistake people made is they want to jump to peace. So they think, well, I just bypass this inner world of mine and I just focus on meditating my heart out 9 hours a day at the wall, staring at it until I feel peace. But actually that doesn't work because we haven't actually really gone head on into that gravitational piece that pulls you down and keeps you from being peace. So that's where we begin,
answer.
Right?
And I can, what do you say? Endorse that answer. My second question is, there seems to be my second question is, there seem to be too many transformation coaches, or just coaches in general, that's sometimes it's scary to go down this path. How does one differentiate between which organization is right for you and which one isn't? So I think this is more like, how does one, it's like everybody seems to be offering transformation nowadays.
Yeah, so that's just it, isn't it? Everyone is offering it. It's a wonderful word to put in front of whatever you do. Yeah. And that's why I say, I think for me, it's worth having always really honest conversations with people. And if you get a sense that this person, here's the thing. For me, what makes a great transformational coach, and I say this to all the students in my courses, is that they've committed 100% to their own transformation. In other words, it doesn't mean that they're fully transformed. It means they have committed unwaveringly to the journey of transformation within themselves, to radically restructuring their inner sense of self and purpose and place in this world to begin to live from that essential spark of beingness that is their reality. And those people, when they go on that journey, are forever changed. And when you talk to a coach who is truly committed to their own world in that way, you will know it. You will know it. They will have something in them that speaks of such authentic honesty. It doesn't mean they're perfect. They've transformed all this. And when you talk to someone who hasn't, who's doing it from a book they read, or they just what I call dabble in the world. They got one foot in the world, like on the weekends, they go to a spiritual retreat, but the rest of the week they're just focused on, playing the stock market or something, make money. Who knows? Like, you will encounter people who kind of dabble, and you will encounter people who have never really gone to the depth of their being, but will tell you, I can take you to the depth of your being, even though I've never been to the depth of my being. I'm going to stand on the shallow beach in the water, and I'm going to yell to you to swim farther out and dive deeper. And you will pick up. I feel that they're intuitively, when you talk to people who've been on the journey, who truly understand the dynamics because they've lived it, that will somehow come through to you. So have those conversations, meaningful conversations, and listen to your intuitive sense of what that person is saying.
And one more thing I'd add to what you said, Leon, is in my understanding, and this is probably not going to be very popular perspective, in my understanding, it's okay to choose the wrong teacher. It's okay to get burnt. It's okay to even be traumatized, because that's going to create a wound in you, which then you will have no choice but to figure out. Yeah, you will have no choice. It's like it's almost like now you've taken this medicine, and now the medicine is doing its stuff. And like, there's no way now. It's like there's no turning back. Once the caterpillar has gotten into the cocoon, there is just no turning back. You become goo, whatever has to happen. So I would actually say it's all right. Whatever resonates. It may not be the most perfect teacher, most perfect organization. Just go, just trust. And that's my. I have this kind of spiritual warrior kind of approach that just go, and you may get burnt, you may get hurt, you may get disappointed, and that's actually going to be a part of your process.
I love it.
I'd like to add.
I say the same thing to the people I work with, and I say I have no issue with you running into a wall. Oh, but isn't your job as a coach to stop me from hitting the walls? I'm like, no. I don't know where you got that idea.
Okay, Kiran has a question, a more challenging question. He said, I have noticed that perhaps the narrative of transformation and awakening has created more grief in the material suffering than material suffering that people experience, because it is simultaneously so alluring and yet so difficult to reach, setting up that impossible seductive game. So he's challenging the whole notion, the whole narrative of transformation and awakening. He says this actually creates more grief than anything else.
I don't know. I can't speak to that. I'll be honest, I can't speak to that.
Cool.
That's not been my experience, so I can't speak to that.
We have a question from Tibor. Could you speak to the distinction between coaching transformation and coaching transformationally?
Yeah, I write about that in my book. Why? I'd love to. However, to explain it, it requires a bit of a contextual piece that I'm not sure we have time for today.
Okay, cool.
Is that okay?
And
so I was going to say,
fine. And I think we are going to be sharing resources for how people can contact you and learn more. So I think if it's a deeper question, Tibor, you might want to look up Leon's work and his workshops and things. Krishna is asking, my question is based on what you both just shared is the following. Is there an end to transformation or awakening, like abiding in that witness of all states of being? I seem to only go on, to go in and out, not always be there. Is there an end? This is a good question.
Yeah. I think it kind of connects in with what I was saying earlier about the arc, right? That it has always felt to me from my own experience and from those I work with, that there is a kind of end of this thing we're calling the transformational aspect of our life experience. But that doesn't at all mean it's the end of our growth and learning. It's kind of related to the idea of levels of consciousness. I learned a lot from Dr. David Hawkins' work, kind of mapping out levels of consciousness and noticing that even very high levels of consciousness, that there are levels above it. So the transformational journey feels like its own kind of reconfiguring of our certain level of consciousness within us. And we kind of land in a place where we feel much more grounded in the reality of our existence, and our purpose, our place, our worth, our value. But there's still much more that can be experienced, I believe, in this human form. And I'm not necessarily able to speak to the highest levels that many gurus can speak to, because I haven't simply myself experienced absolute unified enlightenment. But that doesn't mean it's not a possibility for me. It's just that hasn't been my experience yet. But I will hold, you were saying earlier, like transformation feels like it ends the moment I no longer seek transformation. And that's a really good marker that you put there, Nitya, because that's how it feels. There will come a point when it's like that piece of my life feels complete. So what next then? How then is the world calling me to grow from this place that I now am? And it's very, I find, different for everyone at that point.
I love your response. And I want to add to it that there might be, we don't know if there is, there might be an endpoint to transformation. What I'm noticing is it doesn't help to think about it. Because the moment you set up an endpoint, you're again now in contradiction. It's like, okay, that's where I need to be. It'll take me another 10 years or 10 lifetimes or 100 lifetimes. And the moment you set up an endpoint, you will forever be in lack of some kind. So there may actually be an endpoint. Some traditions talk about that. Some traditions seem to have an open state, no, like the Taoist tradition, they have no endpoint. He never talked about a goal like nirvana or enlightenment. He said the way. It's just the way. There's no destination. The way is the destination. So there is something nice about not holding that too tight, that what is the end point of this is what I'd like to say.
Oh, that's so well said. Thank you. So valuable.
And let me see, there's a question from Charles on Instagram. Can the transformational process happen at a group level as well as at an individual level? And if so, how does that look? Charles.
Okay, so again, I would say unequivocally yes. And I would say it looks the same. Now, I don't mean in a very kind of loosey-goosey way. I mean, the dynamics of transformation are the dynamics of transformation. And if you look at our world today, we're a collective. And there are many who are speaking about this being our time of great transformation, where the systems that we have built to govern our world, that have been born of a very old consciousness, are beginning to shake and crumble. And we're beginning to see things that were hidden for a long, long time in many, many shadows. And we're beginning to have conversations about these things. And we're beginning to see the pain and the grief that is a natural part of transformation come up. So we see that on a macro level, our planet is going through, as some would say, its own kind of dark night of the soul right now. So for me to simply answer it is absolutely what happens on an individual level is happening on a collective level. And as more of us individually awaken, we're going to see the same thing happen at a collective level. But again, coming back to why we talk about the dynamics of transformation is because nobody really comprehends. And therefore, it engenders fear. For example, if we begin to see a healthcare system collapse, a healthcare system that we have benefited from, but we understand that the healthcare system is built on something like greed, profit, endless growth. What then? That system is going to begin to shake and eventually crumble, but we want to hold on to it because we see it as something that has served us. Okay, I'm just giving a very simple example. But the same things are going to happen on a collective that happen on an individual level, where we have to begin to reveal and illuminate the shadows of our mind collectively and begin to see all the systems that we have built from that old, often fear-based consciousness, so that we can move into perhaps creating communities, societies, and systems of governments, of governance, of justice, that reflect the essential unity and magnificence of all human beings. See, that's a paradigm shift. but we're going to have to go through a really, really dark time. And if more people understand that this dark time that we're heading into is perfectly natural, it must happen, we need to lean into it. How does that change things than if we try to resist it and say, no, this can't possibly be happening. This shouldn't be happening. This is wrong. This is bad. And we try to hold on to these old systems. Yeah.
Beautiful. So we're coming to the end of our time. Leon, one quick last question from Vivek. I recognize that I'm on a transformational journey and a lot of close friends recognize it, but few think that I have changed. How can I handle this conflict?
I have to ask, are you concerned with what others are thinking about you and your change?
Allow Vivek. Vivek, do you want to say something?
They are
You can
close.
unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, they are close.
Keep going.
They are close.
The people who think I've changed are close. It concerns. It is a concern. It does bother.
It does bother you. Yeah. So I'm not exactly sure what to say at this point.
And
I would say that that's actually, Vivek, that's actually very good.
Yeah.
That it's like the seed and the oyster, right? The oyster has to now build the pearl around the seed or whatever that little dirt has gotten into it. So you're in this transformation journey and your friends are recognizing it, and few think that you're on some journey, but nothing really has changed in you. And this is creating conflict in you. This is the transformation journey. This is, it's not some other this is the transformation journey of you dealing with what people think about you. And, are you matching up to what you're saying and not saying? Are you a hypocrite? Or this is a new fad that you're into. And this is really challenging your identity of who you think you are. And this is it. This is now everything you're learning from me, from Leon, from everybody else. This is the most hurtful thing in your life right now, painful thing in your life, maybe one of the most painful things. So now apply that to this, apply that to creating that little pearl around this piece that's kind of really bugging the insides of you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, no, I was at a loss for words because I just it's perfect. It's perfect. Right. We're talking about, we don't really know what transformation necessarily is. And it's like, this is it. This is another signal, right? This is it. Lean into it. Lean into what it shows you about the way that you are perceiving and thinking and understanding and interpreting the world around you, the meaning that you're making of these things. Lean into that. Dialogue about it. Converse with it. Open it up. And then notice how you grow from that. And a year from now, will people say the same thing?
Thank you.
Amazing. So Leon, let me now just share, at least on Zoom and Instagram, I'll be able to share your slides. I can't really share it on Instagram. I can share it on Zoom and YouTube. Let me just share a few things. One is your book. It's called A Shift in Being. Let me just share that so people can have a look at that.
Oh, thank you.
That's A Shift in Being. That's the first thing I wanted to share. Look that up. It's on Amazon. I have it on my Kindle as well. You can look it up.
Yeah.
The next thing
and it's not really it's not really just for coaches. I'll just say, I know it's called The Art of Deep Transformational Coaching, but the reality is the first half of the book speaks about what we're speaking about today. Just kind of helping people illuminate this journey.
The next thing I want to share is, if I can find it. 1 second, let me just put that slide up. Too many tabs. That must be a metaphor for something. Okay, this is your website. Let me just share this. 1 second. Can you just tell them your website while I'm opening it, Leon? What is the website?
Sure. It's pretty straightforward. It's the Center for Transformational Coaching.com with an ER for center. Center for Transformational Coaching.
And that's what it looks like.
That's it right there. Yeah.
And let me also create the slide of the different upcoming programs with you. So Center for Transformational Coaching.com is the website.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a couple of programs for India-based residents coming up that
you're coming to India, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm coming in November for a retreat, but the retreat is full. But we have a couple of online programs that people may be interested in, and they're all available on the internet, on the website. The first one is an 8-week course called The Art of Holding Space. Now, this has to do with our capacity to be presence, to be, again, this is being-based work. So what is it to be a presence that can support and uplift simply by the nature of your presence? So deeply, deeply grounded and expressive, that other people in your presence can feel safe enough to open up their lives to you, because this is what we're talking about here, isn't it? The ability to have conversations that matter. And if you think you could advance your own ability to be that space for others, then that course would be of interest. And that starts October 31st. The other one is our big signature program, the Deep Coaching Intensive. It's what the book is also all about. And that starts in January. And that's with our India-based partner, Back to Source Coaching. It's a partnership with Amrita Singh and others. And yeah, all of this is available on our website, or should be, if you
Great.
scan the
And I will share, you can scan those codes if you're on YouTube or Zoom. And I'll also share these links for those of you who are part of my groups on WhatsApp and things. You'll get access to these things. Otherwise, if you're on Instagram, just look up centerfortransformationalcoaching.com and you'll get access to all of these things. Great, we did it. Somehow we pulled off 3 different platforms without going crazy. That itself is amazing. We had Instagram, we had Zoom, we had YouTube. And also I've kind of forgotten how to use the webinar mode of this. So that was a change to use webinar mode. So it was, at one level, there was a lot of thinking going on. Okay, how do we do this? But at another level, I was quite relaxed. And it's wonderful to have your smiling presence to make that easy. And I just want to end by saying that, Leon, it's been a real pleasure because I feel you're really radiating and exemplifying whatever it is you're trying to convey to the world. And I feel more than what you just said, just seeing you, listening to you, noticing how you responded to questions or even refused to, sometimes said, yeah, nothing's coming. And not being in always trying to have the perfect answer for everything. You have kind of shown us what it's like to live that space. So it's been a very enriching conversation. The main thing I've taken from this conversation for me is noticing that when I'm in conversation with people, one of the questions we asked was, how do you go from a transactional conversation to a transformational conversation? Was to genuinely be interested in the other person and their experience. And that's something that's staying with me from today's conversation. Anything you'd like to say before we end?
Oh, how good this was. You know, talk about the smiling face. Look at it. Look at this smiling face, folks. I mean, just hanging out with this guy is a real pleasure. So thank you for having me as your guest on your channel today. Love being here. You're a gracious host and just, I can tell, an awesome guy to hang out with. So thank you. This is good work.
And I want to reveal one of your secrets. Most people don't know that beyond just being a transformational coach, Leon is into motorcycles. So he's coming to do a bike trip to Kerala. I think that was pretty cool. You might lose some of your beautiful white skin and become more brown, become more like us by the end of your trip.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to riding the Royal Enfield bikes. Yeah, for a week there. So that's after the retreat that we're doing. I'm going to take a special trip. So yeah, so looking forward to that. It's gonna be wonderful.
And I love how you bring these elements. You bring not only your work to different countries, you bring your passion to it as well. That's a great example of, we have to keep it light. We have to do this beautiful work at the same time. Remember our individuality and our passion, things we enjoy doing, and not lose sight of that. So beautiful. Thank you again, Leon, and everybody who joined us on Zoom and Instagram and YouTube. Lots of love, and you will get again the links to Leon's website and his upcoming courses from me. Thank you all, and let's just end with 10 seconds of silence. Nice deep breath. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.